I'm Ashira Ungar. Welcome back to the Kosher Convert. I lived in England for a couple of years and fell in love with some of the food there. Now, don't panic, we're not going to make British food. Actually, some of the best food in England is Indian. So today we're going to start a series of episodes on Indian food. Don't be scared away if you think that Indian food is too hot and spicy. There are actually a lot of different spices in Indian food, and there's only one that adds a lot of heat. So you can either make it really hot or really mild, and it's completely up to you. Today we're going to make a traditional chicken curry. The first step in making a curry is to make the curry paste. Now, it's really kind of better to do this from scratch because you can control what goes into it, and so you can come up with a flavor profile that you like, and also it can be kind of hard to find a curry paste that's pre-made, that's kosher, that you actually like. So we're going to do it today from scratch. You're going to have whole spices, and then you're going to have a couple of powdered spices too. So I'll take you through what we're going to use today. We start with 3 tablespoons of coriander seed, 2 tablespoons of cumin seed, 1 tablespoon of fennel seed, a tablespoon of fenugreek, 1.5 teaspoons of grains of paradise, or you could substitute whole black peppercorns, 2 red dried chilies, and 3 curry leaves. Sometimes curry leaves can be kind of hard to find. I would like to use fresh. I couldn't find them. Dried curry leaves are okay, and if you can't find them at all, you can just leave that out if necessary. In addition to the whole spices, we're also going to have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1.5 teaspoons of turmeric that's already powdered, 1/4 cup of white wine vinegar, and 3 tablespoons of water, and then we're going to cook all of that in 1/3 cup of vegetable oil. This is an electric spice mill, which basically just grinds the whole spices into nice fine powder. You can use a mortar and pestle, or you could use even a blender, but you don't get as fine a result. Okay, so when you get done, you just want to make sure that you have a nice fine powder. And once all of your whole spices are ground, you're going to add the rest of the powdered spices, which is the salt, garlic powder, and turmeric. And turmeric is one of those things that's really healthy for you, but you have to be careful because when it's wet, if it gets on your clothing, it will never come out. And just mix all of the dry spices together, and then add the white wine vinegar and the water. And just mix that until you get a nice paste. And now we're going to cook it in oil. I like to let the oil get a little hot before I put the curry paste in. And this is only going to cook for about 5 minutes. You don't want it to burn. It's really important. If it gets burned, it's going to give a burned flavor to everything that you put it in. So make sure you don't overcook. So when you get done making the curry paste, you're going to end up with something that looks basically like this. You can see that with the beginning of the actual curry, there are a lot of ingredients. It's a tablespoon of cloves, a tablespoon of cardamom pods, 6 to 8 curry leaves. I'm using dry this time just because I couldn't find fresh. 2 cinnamon sticks, and 3 star anise pods. Now, the foundation for almost any Indian dish is going to be onion, ginger, and garlic. We are using in this 2 medium onions, diced pretty fine, 6 cloves of garlic, and 3 tablespoons of fresh ginger, or you could use ginger paste. Again, we're going to do 3 tablespoons of the curry paste that we just made, a teaspoon of turmeric, a teaspoon of brown sugar, a teaspoon of tomato paste, 1/2 cup of coconut milk, and a 14-ounce can of diced tomatoes, and 1/3 cup of oil. Now, actually, this time I'm going to be using seitan in place of chicken. I think it's a little bit more healthy, and so if you're using chicken, it's about 3.5 pounds, and you want to use skinless. I like it boneless and skinless, but if you want to do, if you prefer the bones, go ahead and just joint it and have it cut into chunks, and the bones are okay. So now we're using whole spices again, but you'd never want people to eat the whole spices, so you're going to want to pick out a lot of the spices before you serve it. It's really hard to fish out little cardamom pods and cloves, so I usually cook the larger spices whole, and then I'll fish out the star anise pods. But I put the cloves and the cardamom into a little spice pouch. So you can use cheesecloth or a tea bag even, something that you have around, even a coffee filter I've heard can be used for this. But basically, just tie them into a little pouch so that they'll give off their flavor into the oil when they're cooking, but they're not gonna get lost in the food and then, be very unpleasant for somebody to bite into. So the first thing that we're gonna do is heat the oil, and we're gonna add our whole spices and our spice pouch to the hot oil. You can really tell once it's been cooking for about 5 minutes that the spices are starting to give off their scent and their flavor, and it smells amazing. Okay, so once that's had a little bit of time to cook, we're gonna add the onion, ginger, and garlic. And again, that's really the foundation for almost every Indian dish. You're gonna wanna let that cook until the onions really turn brown. The curry is actually a really great dish to make for Shabbos in the winter when you have to make food early and you don't eat it for a while, because it's one of those dishes that really gets better and better as it sits. So even if you make it Thursday night or early in the day on Friday, the flavors are going to develop and it's just going to get better and better, and then by the time you actually eat it, it'll be amazing. I know a lot of people don't think of curry as a traditional Jewish dish, and I guess this one really isn't, but Jews have been living in India for at least 2,000 years, and there's a long, interesting history there. All right, so you can see that the onions have started to brown. So now we're going to add the curry paste and the turmeric. Then you're going to add the chicken, or in this case, seitan. And at this point, you're just going to mix until you get all of the pieces coated. And if you've never worked with seitan before, you can see how much it looks like meat here. And the consistency is really solid, and when you bite into it, it really almost feels like you're eating meat, so it's a great substitute. Okay, so once it's all coated, just cover it and let it sit and cook until the chicken's just about done. Once the chicken is just about cooked, take the cover off and we're going to add the rest of the ingredients. It's the coconut milk, which is of course parve, the tomato paste, and the brown sugar. Just work those in. Okay, and then add the diced tomatoes. Okay, so once everything's in there, the last step is just to add salt and pepper to taste. So I just add a little bit of salt. And we talked earlier about how you can really make Indian food as spicy or as mild as you want. And this is the point where you would do that. So, just taste it and see if you think the heat level is good. And if you want it a little bit spicier, go ahead and put some cayenne pepper in now. I'm just gonna add a whisper. I mean, really a whisper. Not even 1/8 of a teaspoon. Okay, and the last step here is optional. I like to add cilantro to almost any of the Indian dishes that I make, and I like to put some of it in the actual dish and let it cook in, and then save the rest of it to be the garnish on top. So once the curry finished cooking, I fished out all of the whole spices, the anise pods, the spice packet, the cinnamon, all the curry leaves, so make sure you keep track of how many you had and where they are. And if you're making this for Shabbos, you probably want to do that before candle lighting. And then just put a little garnish on to serve. I know this has been a complicated dish. There are a lot of steps, there are a lot of spices, a lot of ingredients, but you end up, because of all of that work, with a really complex flavor that's really interesting. B'teavon?